Welcome to the Politics of Everything. I'm Amber Daines, your host and podcast producer. This is a half hour of power, a podcast dropping every week where I unpack the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment, quality, and much, much more. Our guests are seasoned in the field or topic of their choice, even if you've not heard of them yet. This is a non-partisan show. So while I love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate of ideas, this is not a purely blue, white, green program. Please subscribe, tune in and enjoy the politics of everything. 100 years ago, if you worked in an office, you'd likely have been crammed into a large room sitting shoulder to shoulder with your colleagues in endless rows of desks. Designed to maximise productivity, these offices made it easy for managers to supervise staff, but were terrible for morale. By the 1960s, offices had evolved into a cubicle layout, giving team members private small spaces within a larger office space. These three-wall cubicles were intended to create more personalised experience in the workplace while still allowing people to converse with colleagues. Unfortunately, they had quite the opposite effect, compartmentalising workers and discouraging interaction. Then came open-plan workplaces and hot desking. And then came a pandemic that demanded we all work from home more than ever if our jobs allowed for it. Since the pandemic, which prompted flexible work arrangements, the function of the office has also shifted to provide more of the experiences we rarely encounter at home: connection, engagement, collaboration, all of which are key elements in creating an inclusive workplace. Angela Ferguson is one of Australia's leading experts in workplace strategy and workplace interior design. For more than 20 years, she's worked with a diverse range of corporate clients across Australia, Asia and New Zealand to strategise and create workplaces that align with the organisation's business strategy, culture, brand, technology, blueprint and wellness initiatives. Angela's been passionate about the future of work since the early days of her career. As co-founder of the Future X Collective and managing creative director of Future Space, Angela brings an intelligence to workspace design that's unique and has a global focus, designing workplaces that consider elements such as how is the business situated amongst its competitors, the challenges that may be facing from outside forces, efficient property strategies, and how the experience of work can be optimised for both individuals and teams. She's a smart lady and she's currently studying a PhD at RMIT University in Melbourne with the title Design at Work, Writing the Future. And of course, we're chatting today about workplace design. So welcome to the Politics of Everything.
Thank you, Amber. Thanks for having me.
Podcasting remotely can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be. Since day one of the Politics of Everything, I have relied on Zencastr's all-in-one solution to make the process quick and painless, the way it should be for those of us who just love great content and want to get our ideas out into the world. If you know me, I'm obsessed with quality in terms of my guests, my sound, and everything about my show has to be great the first time. I'm time poor. It's so easy to use Zencastr. I'm not tech savvy and you don't need to be either. There's nothing to download. Just click on the link and off we go. Zencastr is all about making your podcasting experience easy, and with everything from local recording to automatic post-productions now in their toolkit, you don't have to leave your browser to get that episode done, and done fast. I have a special offer for you, and hopefully you can experience what I have with Zencastr. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my VIP code, thepoliticsofeverything, all lowercase and one word, to get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. How good is that? I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. So, young Angela, what did you want to be when you were a kid? Was it an architect or something like that? Do you remember those early days of what you thought you'd be, and did you kind of get there?
Yeah, look, there were a few sort of different things I thought I'd like to be. One of them was a singer on a talent show, which never really eventuated because I can't
there's still
sing.
time, Angela. Come on.
Yeah, there's a lot more reality TV around now. But yeah, look, I think I always knew I'd do something creative, but wasn't quite sure what that was. And initially I thought it was graphic design, and I studied it. I went to TAFE actually first because, you know, they had lots of different courses there. So they had painting and art and sculpture and graphic design and, you know, filmmaking and photography. And so I tried all these different things. And what I eventually came to realise was that I wanted to do something more three-dimensional, because I'd actually grown up playing outdoors, and I'd grown up riding my bike and playing on building sites with my siblings. And, that idea of kind of nature and physical space was really important to me and was a kind of value that I had, that connection to nature from the interiors that we inhabited. And that led to me thinking, there must be a course that you can do about that, because this was before the internet and before reality TV and all those renovation shows. And I came to figure out that there was a course called interior design. And so I went to RMIT and studied there. And the rest is kind of history, really.
Excellent. Something we touched on when I was thinking about the prep for today, and I know the agency that you work with, we mentioned this, and it was originally going to be the topic, but I thought we need to go broader because of all your expertise. Work emails are something which all of us have to live with if we're in an office environment, and even off-site, I guess. A lot of my clients that might be in engineering and so forth definitely rely on their digital comms. That we need to manage it better, though. Can you give us examples of how you think that can be incorporated into the way we think about, workplaces and workspaces, particularly in that 24/7 digital communications world? Like, I almost mourn that time when I started my career in the 90s, where when I logged off from work, it was kind of ish. Yes, it did tether me to my desk a bit as a journalist, but it also meant more freedom mentally. So I'm just wondering if you've got some top tips, because I think most of us struggle with this.
Yeah, look, I think, there's a lot of drawbacks to email. I think initially, when it first started, it was great. It kind of sped up our communication. But I think what's happened now is we've become overly reliant on it. And, it's this endless cycle of constantly replying to emails. So people really need to learn to take back some of their power when it comes to email. Like, not every email needs to be answered immediately. Not every email is urgent. Email is not a conversation. It's not a back and forth. It's not like a phone call. So, some of the things that I do and I recommend for my team and others is that, I have a rule where anything that I'm CC'd on goes to a different folder. So, that cuts down the amount of stuff in my direct inbox. And I very rarely check that, actually, only usually when I want to find out, if somebody else has actioned something that I've asked them to do. And, another sort of, I think, another bad habit is that, sometimes we just need to pick up the phone as well. So
there's a whole generation that doesn't want to do that. I hate to be generational about it, but I've actually run comms courses for in-house for businesses to actually help a younger generation know how to navigate the phone other than texting people.
Yeah, I know, it's a tough one. And then, there's those, things like instant messaging, apps and things as well that, can be used instead of email. We try and teach our people to actually, if it's going to be back and forth, more than 2 or 3 times, that's when you pick up the phone, But if you're sharing documents, of course, I think email's fantastic for that. But, you've got to become a lot more discerning about, when you pick up the phone, when it should be an instant message, or when, this thing should be an email. And I think a lot of that comes with experience, and a lot of that comes with leadership and culture and, feeding some of that training through to the rest of the business.
So what principles underlie a welcoming, motivating, functional and workplace space that everyone loves for staff in 2023? It feels like utopia, even me putting it like that. Are there some things which are common across the work you do that really tick those boxes? Because I think a lot of us, having worked from home and remotely, obviously there's a reluctance for some people to go back to the office full time, and flexibility is important, but also, do workplaces have to work harder to get people to love being there?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think in many ways, I think the pandemic's been fantastic for workplace design, because finally, we're getting our moment in the sun. But in a lot of other ways, I think it's been challenging because, there's a lot of people coming out of the woodwork now and, suddenly they're experts in workplace design. But, it's something I've been doing for a really long time. And the best workplaces have a really good mix of collaborative space, social space, and focus space. And prior to the pandemic, that mix was, there was more of an emphasis on that, collaborative and focus space, and less so on the social. I think people, prior to the pandemic really underestimated the value of that social space in the workspace. But what we're seeing now is that the main reason people are coming to the office is to socialise. So there's this new recognition that the social part of work and those really, those ties that bind people together are so important, often more important than, what are the day-to-day deliverables. If we can get, if a business can get its people into the office to actually, connect with each other and network, then the rest kind of flows on from that in terms of engagement and productivity.
Absolutely. So how have you come to see that through that thoughtfully designed workplaces that can increase productivity, which at the end of the day, a lot of business leaders and owners kind of need to happen. It's great to be social, and I'm sure that fosters that collaborative spirit, but we need to get stuff done too. How can this kind of work together to positively impact our well-being and experience? And then there's some studies which back this up, because I can tell anecdotally how I feel when I've had a fantastic day in a client's office space where all the ideas are flowed, and it's just really cut through some of that clutter, if you like, in my brain about how to organise my ideas for that particular project and just understand people's personalities and drivers. But is there sort of evidence that this is true?
Yeah, look, I think my philosophy, and even the reason I became an interior designer, is that has always been that people are the product of their environment. So, if you create a great environment that ticks all the boxes around addressing our human needs and that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, giving people the ability to self-actualize in the workplace, then this is what makes the workplace successful. But I think the best evidence for us is really how it's working once people are in there. So we can always strategize and design, how a workplace is going to come together, but you never know 100% exactly how it's going to be used. So I think it's really important that, when workplaces are created, some of that flexibility is built in. They're not static experiences. They're places that continue to evolve. And so for us, we do a lot of things like we'll take prospective clients through projects that we've finished. And that's, probably one of the best pieces of evidence that they can see in terms of how a workplace is coming together and addressing some of those specific needs for that business. So, we hear lots of stories as well about, we've got one client we finished a project for recently where they were recruiting this person who was, a tech person. They really wanted them to come and work with them, but the business prior to this new environment had a perception of being a bit older and outdated. But, they built this new, very tech-enabled...
I'm picturing cubicles here, but I could be wrong.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, the old one, yeah, for sure. And, out in the burbs and, all that
that's when you said old-fashioned. I'm just picturing kind of, little rabbit warrens, as I used to call them.
Yes, Dilbert sort of cubicles. But, yeah, so they've moved to this new sort of whiz-bang environment, and the person that they were trying to recruit, kept saying, no. And they said, look, we've just moved. Come and see our new space and we'll show you how we're changing. And this recruit walked in the door and took one look at it and said, where do I sign up? So to us, that's the evidence that, the workplace is starting to meet some of those business goals.
Absolutely. And it sounds sort of superficial, but as someone who, even on my Instagram personal profile, I've got design lover because I love clever design, particularly of small spaces. But it can sound quite superficial, but we spend a lot of time at work and it does really impact not just your productivity, but your well-being and your everyday excitement to maybe go to that space. I mean, I've worked in some very drab offices back in the day, and I think for a long time people saw that as a nice to have rather than something that's really going to enhance that employee experience.
Yeah, that's right. It's essential. I mean, I've seen workplaces that suck the life out of people, and imagine, we spend a
facing
third
the
of our lives at
wall,
work.
no natural light. They're all the things I hate.
Yeah, terrible. Yeah, because we see the befores and, they can be very depressing places.
So workplace designs, like all sort of, aspects of design, probably have some trends. I'd love to pick your brain about what you're currently seeing, what sort of briefs that you're kind of working on at the moment and those trends that might manifest themselves, because flexible and hybrid workplaces are the norm. So, for example, I was in the city of Sydney yesterday at a client, and we know that no office is 100% full anymore, not because people are taking sickies, but because, people have that flexibility now to only come in a certain amount of days a week. So has that driven some of those decisions, and what else are you seeing?
So look, we look at trends in two ways. There's the aesthetic trends, which, kind of I'm not so fussed about, because whenever we create a workplace, we actually look at the brand, that client's brand, and align the aesthetic with the brand. So we're kind of never driven by trend in that respect, in an aesthetic way. But I think some of the kind of bigger, macro trends that we're seeing are things like, companies are exploring that 4-day week, and, they're continuing to experiment with what works and what doesn't. So they're trying new settings in the workplace and loaning furniture or hiring furniture and there's a recognition that, across, say, a business of a few hundred people, there's going to be lots of different teams within that business that work very differently. So what's best for one team or one individual might not necessarily be right for another team or another individual. So, they're continuing to experiment and trial and test, which I think is, a fantastic trend.
Yeah, that's great. I've never thought about the borrowing of furniture and being able to sort of, I guess, adapt your space depending on what the business demands, whether that be a training room with lots of breakout areas or perhaps, some sort of audio-visual element to the design. There must be so many bits which people kind of, as the business evolves and changes, need to adapt to.
Yeah, and people need to keep an open mind. Like the day you move in, we never call that, that's really day one of the process for us, because people move in and then, that human element is actually what makes the space come alive. And so, that's when you need to start to keep an open mind and look at, okay, so, is this right? Do we need to adapt and flex and, do some things differently than we had initially thought perhaps?
And that's often not just putting more people into a space, because I'm thinking as a business grows, my natural thought is more humans, more desks, if you like, in that office. But it could be other ideas I could imagine. I'm not sure what they would be, but I could see the potential to kind of explore the ways in which your particular workforce operates. So that could be, the IT team only come in 3 days a week or something like that. So that space could then perhaps be used for something else in the rest of the week. I'm thinking that, being really economical with the use of space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we're actually seeing that spatial metrics have changed a bit. So because of the pandemic, people want to be a bit further apart now than they used to be.
Social distancing.
Yes, the social distancing, but they want that perception that, they're not overcrowded. And, the space isn't too dense. So there's that fine balance of, what is enough density to create, vibe and spark, but then what is enough, room for people to move around and not feel like they're all on top of each other and they're, physically compromised from a, kind of cross-contamination perspective. But
that's a good thing, I think. Even ventilation and things like that, because, I know a lot of businesses have air conditioning and so forth, but I think we all are very conscious that that's not always the best thing for our general health, our day-to-day health in some ways.
Yeah, and so, part of that too is we're seeing a lot of a trend towards, not only mothers or parents' rooms, but, meditation rooms and prayer rooms and wellness rooms and spaces for people to do yoga and, multi-purpose wellbeing spaces, which I think is a fantastic trend. Genius bars and help desks for the IT people. They're actually really hard to get into come into the office at all, because they can do everything remotely.
And they're not sort of people-centric jobs in a way, are they? They're very
not traditionally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, do you do much sleeping pods? I always thought it was a terrible idea sleeping at work, but that's probably because I always I don't know, I was always, conscious that, my work colleagues are just outside and am I going to have a wrinkled dress afterwards? Will my makeup be squished? It's all very, I don't think I could relax in an office and sleep personally.
Yeah, no, I think they're a bit, I think people feel a bit vulnerable in them. We did put them in one company many years ago, it's about 10 years ago. And apparently after hours, there were a couple that used it and they broke the sleep pod. They weren't actually sleeping. So,
right. Well, it does welcome that activity, I think.
It does.
So I know the vulnerability, and it's just interesting. Even if I was, it's my company, I don't think I'd want to sleep at work, even though that probably, a good nap can be very invigorating, but I think I have to do it in my home.
Yeah, but meditation's great. Meditation's an amazing way to reset.
Absolutely.
And that's something I think people do feel comfortable doing at work if you've got the right, privacy around the space to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Look, this is a bit of a loaded question, but I'm just wondering, all the great design, and look, I interviewed the architect for the new Atlassian building in Sydney last year, and she was amazing. But, I think big companies, big budgets, can they do it better when it comes to workplace design flexibility because of that, I guess, financial stretch that they've got? Or are there other examples of great purposeful and successfully designed spaces that you rate that might not be, your big end of town household name companies?
Yeah, look, I don't necessarily think that larger companies have, I mean, they do have an advantage with a bigger budget. And,
Like
you know, so
spending $1
they,
billion on your building, and that,
yeah.
apparently the last thing you only have to come into the office one day a year. So that's
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Four times a year they want people to get together and
yeah.
not necessarily in the office. But I think that whole Atlassian building, I think, is such an anomaly when it comes to workplace design. It's not my point of view is that it's not really a commercial exercise because nobody has got the ability to do what they're doing. Like they're kind of out of the stratosphere. But, for your average company, I mean, some of the big banks and, big accounting firms and whatever, sure, have a bit more to spend, but they can be just as frugal as someone without a big budget because there's a lot of scrutiny about where, a lot of public companies are spending their money. What we usually try and do is focus the budget on the initiatives that are going to give people the most bang for buck or, the most impact. So a big trend that we're seeing is people wanting sit-to-stand desks.
Oh, I love my
So
sit to stand. I'm on a standing desk now. I
exactly.
never podcast sitting down for all sorts of reasons, but
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
life-changing, really.
Yeah, so spending money on, great chairs for people and a really good sit-to-stand desk that is, it's a really easy to use. It's got a, electronic function, it's quiet. They're the sorts of things that people can spend their money on. And, we can be very creative with paint, for example. So if you want a fun, interesting, lively space, there are things that you can do with some of the more economical finishes and materials and things. But yeah, so I think sometimes bigger companies do have an advantage. We've actually just refitted our workspace, which is we can probably accommodate about 30 people. So it's not a large workspace. And, there are things that I wish I had more money to spend on and a few of the niceties we're going to have to wait for. But, the things that were really important to us, and we talked to our team about,
What
was
were
most
some of those
important.
things? What was the key, I guess, ideas behind what you've ended up creating?
Yeah, well, the big ones for us were that open collaborative space. So we've got some areas that are screened off but are still in the open that are enabled by tech that allow people to do those social activities, but also some of that collaborative work. And the other one was the quiet rooms. And that's something that we're seeing.
Oh, I
Those
love a
little,
quiet room, particularly if you've got
yeah,
to do something really focused or deadline driven. I think
absolutely.
that's why
And
people often want to work from home. You'd have a big report to do and you didn't want interruptions. And it's a really clear signal that you're currently not available for chit chat or collaboration.
yeah. Well, even now when we're doing so many calls on Teams and Zoom, that can't be done in the open plan. So the actual, we're doubling the number of 1 to 2 person quiet rooms that we're putting into spaces now. So we're actually doubling a lot of that built environment, which is kind of an interesting trend post-pandemic.
And a final trend I just want to ask you about, because it's very close to my heart, I'm actually studying a master's in environmental business management, is sustainability. Is that something which people, no matter their budget, are interested in, being able to use recycled water perhaps in their building design, or if they're retrofitting, being able to use recyclable, materials or, things that just aren't sort of fatty and just going to be chucked into landfill in 2 years' time. Is that something you're seeing as part of your brief more and more or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, definitely. Definitely. It's a given now, and it's particularly with, a lot of companies looking to communicate their ESG initiatives to all of their
Yes.
stakeholders. So that sustainability piece, like it's actually, I think, fantastic how it's evolved. It's become pretty much a given that we do it on any project. And but then it's also becoming part of that health and wellbeing story as well, because you're choosing low VOC materials and you're choosing, things that don't provide things that contribute to a much healthier indoor air quality. And, so there's that really holistic wellbeing story for the people inhabiting the space, as well as, the environment and the world around us.
So, changing tack a little bit, what is some of the best advice that you ever given? Who gave it to you, and why do you really rate that advice?
Yeah, look, I've had, that's a really great question, Amber, and I had to think quite hard about that one.
I like
So,
to push people out of their comfort zone a little bit. Or some people just, they've got that tagline which is in their head because, the university
yeah.
lecturer told it to them and it's always driven them, or their father or something like that. So it
Yeah,
depends.
I've probably got, like, I've had lots of great advice over the years and lots of different mentors and, positive and negative really. But I think there's two that stick in my mind. One is that Marianne Williamson, that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. that whole piece of writing that she's done. And the other one that kind of talks to that a little bit as well is that the Dr. Seuss saying where he says, be yourself because everybody else is taken. Like, I really love that. When my business grew many years ago, it was probably about 12 years ago, I thought for some reason I had to be somebody different. Like, I had to be more serious, like more grown up, and I don't know, just kind of different. And that saying, which I kind of read when my boy was little, be yourself because everybody else is taken. It just reminds me often that, there's nobody else like me. And it's okay to be who I am. I don't have to be like other people. I can just, do things my way, and let's kind of go with the flow of life and ideas and business and everything that's happening and just see where I get to. So, I feel like that's a great one to bring into my life, not just work, but, all of my life.
Absolutely. Look, if we spoke again in 12 months' time, what would be your number one goal you would have hoped to have achieved, and why that goal?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest challenge that I'm finding in my work right now is that, so if I'm working with a company, pretty consistently their staff are saying they want to choose themselves what days they'll come and work from home and what days that they'll work from the office. And, there's a bit of a conflict there. It's probably only about a day. So staff are saying they want to come in 2 days. Leaders are saying they want them in 3 days. But at the same time, the biggest complaint people have when they get into the office is that when they do get there, the people, their colleagues that they wanted to see there are not there. So that's a big problem to solve right now. But so if we were to talk again in a year, I would hope that I've solved that, and that, and I think the answer, I've got this hunch that the answer is that the right sort of blend of people, place, technology tools in any given situation. But, I'd love to be able to solve that, because that's the thing I think most businesses are grappling with right now.
Absolutely. Look, as we wrap up our conversation today, we have covered a lot, but what would be your final takeaway message for all of us listening on the politics of workplace design?
From where I sit, my final takeaway is probably, hybrid work is here to stay. If you're a business that is not offering your people flexibility, then you're living in the last century. The future of work is, it's all about that emphasis on people and culture. And then how does the technology and how does the physical environment come into play to support that? And then, how do you continue to experiment with those things to figure out what works and what doesn't? So, yeah, look, hybrid work is here to stay. It's, power to the people, and let's support them in creating their own best future of work.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. And if you do want to connect further with Angela, there will be some details on the show notes. Until next time, take care. Thanks so much for listening today. If you've enjoyed the politics of everything, I thrive on your feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network through Apple, Spotify, and all the usual suspects. I'm always on the hunt for new and diverse guests, so if you or someone you know has a fresh idea you're busting to get out there, please email me at amber@amberdanes.com and my crew will get back to you very soon.